English for gentle minds.
A space for calm clarity and meaningful conversations.
Welcome to Gentle Minds, where we slow down, ask big questions, and try not to fall asleep while recording.
Today, we're actually trying to fall asleep, but not in a boring way. Promise?
We're digging into a claim that's all over the internet. There's this so-called military method that says you can train yourself to fall asleep in under 2 minutes.
Which sounds fake, like a YouTube hack or something your uncle swears works because Navy SEALs do it.
Yeah. But here's the thing. This method's been around since at least the 1980s. It shows up in a book called Relax and Win. And the claim is that US fighter pilots used it to fall asleep even during war. The technique promises a 96% success rate if you stick with it for 6 weeks.
Okay, but come on, how would that even work? You're telling me I can lie down tense and buzzing from the day and just shut down like a robot?
That's exactly what we're exploring today. Is this a real technique backed by science and psychology? Or is it just a fancy bedtime story we tell ourselves to feel in control?
And here's the twist. What if you can't visualize the calming scenes the method asks for? What if you're one of those people who has aphantasia, zero mental imagery?
Does the method still work for them? And if not, what does?
Because if this method really is as universal as the claims say, it should work for everyone, even if your brain's more audio only than 4K Ultra HD.
Over the next 40 minutes, we're going to break it down. We'll look at where this technique comes from, how it works, and what real people say about trying it.
And fair warning, I may call out some BS if it smells like bro science.
I expect nothing less.
Let's get into it.
So let's start with what this military sleep method actually is and where it comes from. The story most people repeat goes like this. During World War II, the US Navy needed a way to help pilots sleep anytime, anywhere, even under intense stress. Because if you're flying a plane in a war zone, you can't afford brain fog from sleep deprivation.
Yeah, kind of important not to doze off mid-dogfight.
Exactly. Supposedly they developed this technique to help pilots fall asleep in under 2 minutes. Later it was written up in a 1981 book called Relax and Win, Championship Performance. That's the earliest source anyone can find. It wasn't a scientific paper, but a kind of performance guide that mixed sports psychology and military discipline.
Okay, so already I'm a little suspicious. I mean, it sounds cool, secret military method and all, but we're talking about a self-help book from the early 80s?
Right. It's not peer-reviewed or backed by double-blind studies. But what is interesting is the actual technique it describes. It's very specific. It has steps.
Give me the recipe. Let's hear it.
Right. Step 1 is full body muscle relaxation, starting from the top down. You start with your face. You're told to relax your forehead, your eyes, your jaw, your tongue. Then your shoulders drop, your arms go limp, and you work your way down to your legs and feet. Like a slow wave moving downward.
So, like a body scan, almost? That's in a lot of meditation apps.
Exactly. Then comes step 2, clearing your mind. You're supposed to spend 10 seconds just letting go of thoughts.
I can barely let go of thoughts for 10 milliseconds.
Well, that's where step 3 comes in. If you can't clear your mind, the technique tells you to use visualizations, like lying in a canoe on a calm lake under a blue sky, or lying in a black velvet hammock in a pitch black room. And if even that doesn't work, you're supposed to just repeat, don't think, don't think, don't think.
That last one sounds like something I'd chant during a panic attack.
The logic is to block intrusive thoughts by giving your brain something neutral to loop on, like a white noise thought.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You relax your muscles, you try to go blank, and if your brain doesn't cooperate, you imagine something soothing or repeat a phrase.
That's it. Do that consistently for 6 weeks, and supposedly 96% of people can fall asleep in under 2 minutes.
That number feels made up. Like, who's in the 4%? People who drink espresso at bedtime?
It's unclear where that number comes from, honestly. The book doesn't cite a formal study. It just says it.
See, that's what gets me. The idea isn't totally crazy. I mean, progressive muscle relaxation and guided imagery are legit. But once you throw in a magic number like 96% success, it starts to feel like a late night infomercial.
That's fair, but I also think there's something psychologically powerful about having a routine, especially if it feels official or exclusive, like a military secret. People trust systems more than vague advice.
Totally. And the military branding gives it this macho edge. Like, if Navy pilots do it, so can you. But not everyone's a pilot. Some of us are just lying in bed with anxiety and 18 browser tabs open in our brains.
Which brings us to the real question. Does it work in everyday life? Not in a bunker or cockpit, but in a normal bedroom, with normal distractions.
And what if you can't visualize at all? I didn't even know aphantasia was a thing until a year ago. But apparently there are people out there who literally can't picture stuff in their minds. Like nothing. No beach scene, no canoe, just mental static.
And that throws a wrench into step 3 of the method. If you rely on visualization to calm down and you can't visualize, that part of the technique breaks.
But those people still need sleep. So, what do? That's the part I'm excited to talk about.
We'll get into that in a minute. But first, just to frame things, this technique is less about magic and more about pattern. It's asking you to do something deliberate with your body and brain. And repetition might be what makes it work.
Which might explain why people say it takes 6 weeks. Not because it's hard to learn, but because you have to untrain all your bad bedtime habits first.
Exactly. And that's where the technique might be more about discipline than a miracle hack.
All right, so we've got the history, the how-to, and the hype. Now, let's get real. What happens when actual people try this, and not just the imaginary 96%?
Coming up next, aphantasia, adaptations, and whether imagination is even required for rest.
Okay, so the method sounds great on paper. Calm your body, clear your head, picture a calm lake. But we both know real life doesn't follow scripts.
And people's brains definitely don't follow scripts. That's where things get interesting. Because for some people, this whole method falls apart when it gets to the imagery part, especially if they're what's called aphants.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Aphantasia is when your brain doesn't make mental images. Like if I tell you to picture a cat, some people can see it in their head, right? The shape, the color, even the fur. But aphants? Nothing. It's like trying to look at a blank wall.
And when your sleep method tells you to imagine a canoe under the stars, that's not a small problem. That's a hard stop.
One person said trying to do that was like having the HDMI cable unplugged from the monitor. Like, they know what a canoe is, they understand what a lake at night would look like, but they don't actually see anything. No picture forms. Just the idea of it.
It's a fascinating challenge because the method assumes visualization is a universal tool. And clearly it isn't.
But what I loved is that people with aphantasia don't just give up. They adapt. One person said instead of visualizing, they just mentally walked through a field, naming imaginary flowers they couldn't see. It wasn't about sight, it was about mental rhythm.
And others use language instead of imagery, like describing a scene to themselves with words, almost like narrating a book in their own head.
Yeah, internal monologue instead of mental pictures. That's so clever and kind of comforting, honestly. Like, the technique still works if you bend it a bit.
Exactly, because the core goal is the same. Distract your mind from looping stress. Whether that's through imagery, language, or even sound, doesn't matter as much as we think.
Some people even said they use podcasts to do the imagining for them. Like cozy story podcasts that talk slowly and softly and set a scene for you.
Right. External narration instead of internal visualization. It's like borrowing someone else's imagination for a while.
Honestly, I've done that. I'll put on a podcast about Viking history or something mellow and let it carry me. No mental effort, just soft facts and a soothing voice.
The bigger lesson in that. The method isn't about obeying steps like a robot. It's about finding the version of the steps that calms your brain.
Totally. And even people without aphantasia get distracted during visualization. Like you start picturing the canoe, and suddenly you're remembering that time you got sunburned at summer camp, and now you're stressed again.
Exactly. So even for people with full mental imagery, that don't think step is still useful. It gives your brain a task that's neutral, not emotional, not engaging, just soft focus.
One person said they just repeat stop thinking to themselves until the noise dies down. It's like their own mental off switch. No lakes, no hammocks, just one line, over and over.
Brain isn't wired to multitask thought. If you give it one simple, boring phrase, you reduce the space for intrusive ones.
So at this point, I'm thinking maybe the military method is less about military precision and more about tricking your brain with repetition and letting your body follow.
I think that's a fair takeaway. It might sound fancy with the fighter pilot angle, but under the hood it's relaxation, distraction, and consistency.
Okay, but does it actually work for people who try it? Like, really?
That's the next layer. There are tons of first-hand accounts online. Some skeptical, some swearing by it. People who used to take 45 minutes to fall asleep now say they're out in 5.
5 minutes sounds dreamy. I'm lucky if I hit REM before dawn.
One guy said he didn't fall asleep in 2 minutes at first, but after a few weeks he was down from 90 minutes to about 8. And that's still huge.
So even if it's not magic, it's movement in the right direction. Like building a muscle.
Exactly. It's sleep training, and repetition matters.
But I have to ask, is it really the method, or is it just the power of belief? Like, if you think a secret method will work, maybe that's all your brain needs to chill out.
You're not wrong. Placebo's a real force. But even if it is placebo, it still counts. If the method gives people a structure to rely on, that alone can lower stress.
Which makes me wonder, maybe the secret isn't the canoe or the muscles. Maybe the secret is just giving your brain permission to stop solving problems.
That's a good way to put it. Because for most of us, bedtime isn't about rest. It's when all the unsolved things in your life come knocking.
Exactly. So a technique that says, here, do this in this order every night might just be a substitute for control.
Which can be incredibly calming, especially for people who live with anxiety or hyperactive thoughts.
I feel like we've moved away from the military side of this and into something way more human.
Yeah, the method may have come from pilots, but the reason people keep using it, it speaks to how overwhelmed we are and how badly we want something predictable at the end of the day.
And now I'm wondering, what about people who aren't sleep-deprived soldiers? Are we too well rested for this to work? Or not tired enough to crash like they do?
Funny you should say that. The next part of the story brings in a curveball, the exhaustion theory. So here's where the story flips. We've talked about the technique, the steps, the psychology, even how people with aphantasia adapt it. But now let's look at the counterpoint. What if the real reason soldiers fall asleep instantly is just that they're exhausted?
Oh, like they're not relaxed, they're just done.
Exactly. Some people who've served in the military have spoken up and basically said, yeah, we fall asleep anywhere, anytime. But not because of some fancy technique. We're just completely wrecked.
Which makes sense. You're working insane hours, you're training nonstop, you're physically drained. You're not waiting for the perfect visualization, you're passing out the second your body allows it.
One guy said they used to sleep standing up during briefings. That's not relaxation. That's sleep debt.
That kind of kills the myth, though, right? Like if the so-called military method is really just be so tired you can sleep on concrete, then what's the point?
Well, that's the tension. On one hand, this method claims to help anyone fall asleep quickly, if you practice it like a discipline. On the other, you've got real-life soldiers saying it's not about discipline. It's about total exhaustion.
So now we're stuck between two stories. One is neat and hopeful, follow this process and sleep better. The other is messy and grim. You sleep fast because your body has nothing left.
And maybe both are true in different ways. In war zones, people probably fall asleep because they have no choice. But that doesn't mean the method itself is useless for civilians.
Yeah, but it makes me wonder, how much of the method's success is just mimicking the effects of exhaustion? like relaxing your body in stages until your brain thinks you're tired.
That's a good point. The progressive muscle relaxation might be triggering the same biological signals as physical fatigue, just without needing to do push-ups until you collapse.
So it's kind of a shortcut. Fake the body into thinking you've done a 20-mile march without leaving the mattress.
Pretty much. And there's also the question of control again. Exhaustion removes choice. You fall asleep because your body takes over. The method gives you back some choice by creating structure.
I get that, but here's what I'm struggling with. Is it really a method if the success depends on you doing it every night for 6 weeks? That's not instant. That's a routine.
True, but that's also how most behavior change works. No one expects to get six-pack abs in a day. Why would we expect our brains to unlearn years of bad sleep habits instantly?
Fair. I guess I just wish it didn't come wrapped in that fall asleep in 120 seconds. Headline. Because that sets people up to fail.
Or at least to be disappointed. And disappointment adds stress, which definitely doesn't help with sleep.
So now we've got this technique that works. Kind of. Sometimes, if you're patient. And don't expect miracles. But also, it might not be doing anything more than what other sleep routines already do.
Which brings up another question. If the military method is just another name for muscle relaxation and focus, why does this one go viral?
Because it has a story. That's what makes it stick. Not just steps, but context, pilots, war, discipline. It feels official.
And military carries this idea of certainty. People think, if they used it under pressure, it must work for me in my soft bed.
Even though our brains are wired totally differently. We're overstimulated in a different way. Notifications, thoughts, stress scrolling at 1 a.m.
Exactly. And for us, sleep might not be about shutting down. It's about unwinding first. That's a different starting point.
Which means maybe the military method isn't wrong. It's just misnamed. It's not a technique for anyone to sleep instantly. It's a system that might help some people find calm through repetition.
And it's not about 2 minutes. It's about what happens when you treat sleep like a skill.
That's actually kind of hopeful. Like, you don't need to get it perfect. You just need to show up for it, over and over.
Which might be the opposite of what we're used to. We chase instant fixes, but maybe the real fix is practice. Quiet practice every night, even when it feels silly.
So maybe this military method isn't a secret hack. It's just bedtime, with boundaries.
Exactly. And if we think of it that way, it's actually more powerful. Not because it promises magic, but because it invites us to build something slowly.
Okay, so we've gone all the way from fighter jets to flower picking events to podcast-induced sleep. I think I need a nap just from talking about this.
That might mean the method is already working.
Honestly, yeah. But seriously, what did we actually learn here? Like, beyond the hype?
We learned that the so-called military sleep method has more in common with basic relaxation techniques than secret tactics. It gives you steps to slow your body, empty your mind, and create calm. And while it may not literally knock you out in 120 seconds, it gives your nervous system something predictable to lean on.
Even if you're someone who can't visualize, like you're staring into mental static, there are still ways in. Words, monologue, sound, repetition.
Exactly. The visuals are just one tool. The real value is the process. It gives you something to do when your brain won't stop doing.
And I think that's why people keep coming back to it. Not because they're in the military, but because they're overwhelmed. Sleep has become this frustrating mystery, and this method offers something solid, repeatable.
Right. And the structure becomes its own kind of comfort. Even if you don't fall asleep in 2 minutes, you're not flailing. You're doing something with purpose. That counts.
It really does. I think the biggest shift for me is seeing sleep not as this passive thing. Like, I'll sleep when I'm tired, but something I can practice, train for. Like emotional weightlifting.
That's a good metaphor. And it takes the pressure off. Instead of expecting sleep to just show up, you build a routine that invites it in. Like setting the table every night and hoping your mind finally comes to dinner.
Okay, that's a little poetic for you, John. Are you feeling all right?
Might be the mellow tone rubbing off on me.
Well, I'll take it. So if you're listening right now, maybe try it tonight. Not because it's a miracle, but because it's a rhythm. Relax your face, drop your shoulders, let your body melt. If you can visualize, great. If not, narrate your own story. Or just breathe and repeat a phrase until your thoughts slow down.
And be patient. It might take a few nights or a few weeks. That's not failure, it's training. Give your brain time to learn what rest feels like again.
I'm definitely going to try this more seriously. I've done parts of it before, but now I want to see what happens if I commit. Even just the muscle part sounds helpful. My jaw has been clenched since 2018.
That might be worth looking into.
Anyway, thanks for hanging out with us on Gentle Minds. We hope this gave you something to try, or at least made you feel a little less alone in the 2 a.m. brain spiral.
And if you fall asleep during this episode, we'll take that as a win.
Biggest compliment you can give us, honestly.
We'll be back next time with something else quiet, curious, and possibly sleep adjacent. Until then,
Go rest. You've earned it.